Northwest Village Network is very pleased to offer this program with Felicia Greenfield, conversations around memory and cognitive change. Felicia Greenfield is a licensed clinical social worker and the executive director of the Penn Memory Center, with nearly 2 decades experience in caring for older adults living with dementia and their family support systems. In her leadership role at the Penn Memory Center, Greenfield is a member of the multidisciplinary care team, oversees clinical and research operations, and caregiver support programs. An expert in dementia caregiving, aging, and loss, Greenfield is on the faculty in the University of Pennsylvania's School of Social Policy and Practice, maintains a small private practice, and is an advisory board member and contributor on the podcast Bob's Last Marathon. So, thank you, Felicia. You have to unmute yourself and I'll mute myself.
Great. Thank you for your introduction. It's nice to see everybody here tonight. Thank you for your interest in this topic. Myra reached out to me a couple months ago to ask if I could do, or if someone could do a program on what to do if you're noticing cognitive changes and have concerns about a friend, family member, or neighbor. And so I guess this is in follow-up to another presentation that my colleague Sarah Manning gave called Am I Losing My Marbles, or is it just normal aging? Something along those lines. And I think Sarah came out and gave a presentation on normal cognitive aging and then when to be concerned. So I'm going to do, the way I have my program set up tonight is to do a brief overview of what normal cognitive aging is, what mild cognitive impairment is, and what are some signs of, reasons to be concerned if it's maybe not normal, maybe it is some form of dementia. So the first, 15, 20 minutes or so, I'm going to give you an overview of those memory changes. And then I'm going to pause there at that point to see if there are any questions. And then the second half of the presentation is going to be more of a discussion, a conversation about what to do if you notice somebody in your network, in your family, in your community who may be struggling. What are some best practices for bringing up the topic and what to do? So I will tell you that there is there are no hard and fast, right or wrong rules here, but there are some best practices. And I think that by having a discussion about it, it'll get you all thinking about it, and we'll generate some ideas where hopefully you'll feel like you're leaving with some tools to kind of navigate those situations. So I'm gonna just pull up my presentation here, share it with you. First, what I would like to do is just give an overview of the Penn Memory Center. So the Penn Memory Center is where I've been working since 2006. We are a clinical practice and a research center embedded in the University of Pennsylvania. Our physical location is in the Perlman Center. And we also receive funding from the National Institute on Aging as part of our Alzheimer's Disease Research Center, or ADRC, where we are tasked with being leaders in the field of diagnostics, treatment, and education and research around memory disorders. We have a multidisciplinary team of providers represented from fields of neurology, geriatric medicine, psychiatry. We have a social work team who helps families navigate having navigating the changes that are involved in a diagnosis of Alzheimer's or another dementia. We have a team of neuropsychologists who work on testing, and then we have a whole kind of research team. We offer, I don't know, so like maybe 15 or more research studies right now. So we have a team of coordinators coordinating those studies for the PIs, for the scientists. One of the things that we've been able to do with the support that we get from both our research as well as philanthropy is offer a robust suite of programs and services for the families in our care. So just a few to mention are classes for caregivers to learn about how to best care for a parent or a spouse or another family member or friend with a dementia. We also have support groups. Time Together is a program that is kind of a social isolation program where we match college students with older adults with mild memory problems. And the student serves as a companion to mitigate against social isolation that person with dementia might be experiencing. And it also gives the caregiver a little bit of a break when a student is there to spend some time with the person. Myra and I were just talking about memory cafes. Memory cafes are social gatherings for people with memory loss and their caregivers to come together over some food, and we try to have a special kind of performance or activity at the cafes as well. Our neuropsychologist, Dawn Mechanic Hamilton, offers classes for people with mild cognitive impairment called Cognitive Fitness. And these are classes that teach people compensatory strategies to navigate memory change and also cope with the emotional aspects of their memory change and more. But this is just a brief overview of what we do at the center. And my screen is not advancing. There we go. Okay, so a little bit of background about about aging and memory change. So the number of Americans over age 65 is projected to more than double in the next 30 to 40 years. We're looking at maybe 88.5 million people over 65 by 2050. And we know that age is the biggest risk factor of developing Alzheimer's disease or related dementia. So it's increasingly important to understand the cognitive changes that accompany aging, both normal aging and pathologic. So although dementia and mild cognitive impairment are common, even those who don't experience these conditions may experience subtle cognitive changes associated with aging. This is what we call normal cognitive aging or just normal aging. And it's important to understand this because they can affect a person's day-to-day function, and also kind of distinguishing between normal and pathologic aging helps researchers distinguish between these states and improve diagnostics and treatment. So cognitive change is a normal process of aging, and it's well documented in scientific literature. Some abilities, such as vocabulary, are resilient to brain aging, and sometimes they even improve with age. Other abilities, such as conceptual reasoning, memory, and processing speed, gradually decline over time. So what happens is our neural networks in our brain, our blood flow, and our brain weight starts to decrease even in our 30s. So we really kind of peak cognitively in terms of speed and manipulating and learning new information in our 20s. And then from there, there's a slow, steady decline downward on tests of fluency. Our processing speed starts to become slower as we get older, but we're able generally to compensate for those changes with like the use of calendars or other reminders with technology, we can work around, kind of normal brain changes. It can be frustrating or even scary, but all people in their 40s, 50s, 60s, and beyond start to experience these changes. And, Alzheimer's disease is it is the most feared diseases among older adults. So people, tend to really take these changes very seriously and get concerned. So in just a minute, I'm going to kind of talk about what are some examples of normal, what can be expected, and then move into like 10 warning signs when there might be a problem. So there are two types of intelligence that I want to focus on: crystallized intelligence and fluid intelligence. So crystallized intelligence are skills, abilities, and knowledge that's overlearned, well practiced, familiar. So this would be an example of, crystallized intelligence might even be driving, right? Like we know we've been driving for so long, it's overlearned. We can drive sometimes without even being aware. How many times have you experienced like getting to a place and then you realize when you get out of the car that you don't even remember driving there? Like we just kind of do it intuitively. Our vocabulary and our general knowledge is an example of crystallized intelligence. And these abilities remain stable or they gradually improve over age. Our perspective, our wisdom, these are all examples of crystallized intelligence. And older adults tend to perform better at these types of tasks compared to their younger counterparts. Fluid intelligence, on the other hand, is defined as the ability to problem solve and reason about things that are less familiar and independent of what we've learned. So the ability to process and learn new information, rapidly solve problems, and attend to and manipulate, one's environment. Fluid intelligence also represents executive function. Executive function refers to our ability to plan something and then execute that plan. The way we process things, processing speed, like in a conversation, for example, like even right now, you're taking in what I'm saying and you're able to manipulate it quickly in your head, make sense of it. These things tend to start to slow over time. Memory is an example of fluid intelligence, as is psychomotor ability. Many of these fluid cognitive abilities, especially psychomotor ability and processing speed, peak in the 30s, and then this is where they start to decline over time. And this is just a picture of a graph that represents these changes. So over here you have age, or I should say, on the left-hand side you have these are test scores, and then on the bottom you have age starting in your 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, and then you see these orange, yellow, and red lines. That would be an example of crystallized intelligence. You'll see that these lines go up generally from our 20s into our 80s on tests of vocabulary and word knowledge. And then in the blue, green, gray lines, you see them at their highest in our 20s, and then gradually go down, over time in our 80s. And this is, considered normal. These are tests of processing speed, working memory, and long-term memory. Nobody likes to see lines going down as they get into the later decades. So what I would say to you is that these graphs represent a lot of people. So, thousands and thousands of people. The lines in reality are much messier. Some are going up, some are going down. It's a very messy graph, But researchers have kind of taken this and created trends. So you see these upward trends for crystallized and downward trends for fluid, all within, the realm of normal aging. So I just want to kind of share some examples of what is considered typical or normal aging. So an example would be sometimes forgetting someone's name or an appointment. You might forget you had an appointment, you didn't write it down, but then you remember it later. It's not completely gone from your memory that you even had an appointment. You might go, oh man, I can't believe I forgot that appointment. The important thing is you recalled it later. Sometimes people make occasional errors when managing finances or bills. You might forget a payment. You might forget something in your budget, but it's not consistent. It's kind of a one-off, totally normal. You might need the occasional help with navigating something familiar to you, like the microwave. There might be a little blip where you can't remember, how to operate the microwave or how to record a television program. Generally, you'll go, oh, I don't know what I was thinking. I know how to do that. Sometimes people get confused about the day of the week, like especially if you're not working. Like I know that when I'm on vacation, I don't remember what day of the week it is. But so that's normal, especially in retirement. But you can like look at the calendar and reorient yourself. Sometimes vision changes, but the vision changes tend to be the result of cataracts or just normal changes that are not indicative of spatial kind of relationships. Sometimes, today, maybe 25 times during this conversation, I might forget a word, but then I can maybe come up with it later. So forgetting a word, dropping a word, but then remembering it later is normal. Misplacing things, we all misplace our glasses, our keys, our phones. Generally, we are able to go back and find them later. We might make a bad decision once in a while, forget or neglect to change the oil in our car or, something like that, but it's not happening on a consistent basis. Sometimes feeling uninterested in being with family or friends or doing a social event doesn't mean, you're having drastic personality changes. It just might mean you're not in the mood, and that's fine too. And then as we get older, we also start to develop routines. We like to do things in a specific way, and sometimes we can become irritable if our routine is disrupted. Again, we're not talking about major personality changes, but just maybe some irritability around routine changes to our schedule. So these things are normal. People still tend to get concerned about them, which is natural, but it's within the realm of normal cognitive aging. On the next couple slides, I'm going to go over a list of 10 warning signs that were published by the Alzheimer's Association. So these are very common reasons to be concerned if you're noticing these 10 warning signs in yourself or someone else. This might be when it's time to consider an evaluation. So first, when memory loss or changes to memory disrupts your daily life, it's getting in the way. You're forgetting important dates, like someone that you know and love's birthday, or you're forgetting an event that you've been looking forward to for a long time. People may start telling you that you're asking the same question over and over again, or telling the same story over and over again because you don't remember that you told them. There's also over-reliance on reminder notes when you might see somebody keeping a calendar or putting Post-it notes all over their house. That's a way of scaffolding their memory, compensating for memory. But if it looks like it's that's what's holding them together, that might be time for an evaluation. Experiencing challenges in planning or problem solving, such as following a recipe, a familiar recipe, or consistently failing to pay household bills. With the holidays coming up, this is a common time where family members call to make an appointment for mom. The family all goes to mom's house for Thanksgiving. She usually puts on a beautiful spread and has all of her famous recipes for Thanksgiving. People come over this year and notice things are falling apart. This food is bland. Something was omitted. There's a lot of chaos or disorganization. Mom isn't able to have the same Thanksgiving that she's done for 40 years. So we do the phone calls start coming in around Christmas and Thanksgiving at the Memory Center when this is exposed. So that's a warning sign. Another warning sign is difficulty completing familiar tasks. Like if you go to the same place on a regular basis and then you start getting lost. Or you have a game that you play, a card game, and you suddenly can't remember the rules of a game. That's another warning sign. We talked about earlier, like in retirement, it's easy to forget what day it is. But it's a warning sign when you're like losing track of dates, even seasons and passages of time. So what we call disorientation to place or time is a warning sign. Trouble understanding visual images and spatial relationships. So you might notice somebody having problems with balance or judging distance. And this could cause issues with driving. So if you are noticing someone having, 3, 4, 5 little fender benders in a year, that's a sign that there might be there might be an issue with visual or spatial relationships. Also there might be new problems with words in speaking or writing. Sometimes memory is not the first thing to present in dementia. Sometimes it's visual spatial, but sometimes it's verbal or oral or written communication. So people who are having trouble with words can find it more difficult to engage in conversation and might struggle to come up with words. And oftentimes it's nouns. When my grandmother was experiencing mild stage Alzheimer's, everything was a whatchamacallit. She couldn't come up with the words, so she would make up, words to kind of signal what she was talking about. So another warning sign is the inability to retrace your steps to find those glasses or keys or wallets that we tend to lose. Decreased or poor judgment when it comes to making decisions in dealing with money or grooming or hygiene. So you might notice someone mismanaging their finances, or even worse, getting taken advantage of by internet scammers or telephone scammers. You might notice somebody who is no longer grooming or showering the way they used to. Like a marked decline in these things are an indicator of a problem. Withdrawal from work or social activities because having a conversation is too difficult. You can't keep up with the difficult conversation, or you can't keep up with a sports team or an activity. So if people notice that they're having problems, they might start to withdraw and not engage. And then finally, if you're noticing real changes in mood or personality, like confusion or suspicious, significant depression or anxiety, these might be changes. It might be time to seek an evaluation if you're noticing things like this. Folks may become more easily upset with friends or family, especially if they suspect that you are, picking up on some memory problems. There might be some, kind of defensive behaviors, and they take it out on the people closest to them. So these are warning signs. These are 10 warning signs that come from the Alzheimer's Association that we agree with. And on the next slide, I'm going to show you kind of a pictorial that shows the different stages of aging, including normal aging, and then kind of problematic or pathologic aging. So this green line on top represents normal aging, as does this blue line right below it. So there is a range right in here in the middle of cognitive change in people who are considered in the normal aging category. And then then there's three columns below that blue sloped line. We have a preclinical column, an MCI column, and a dementia column in years over time. So, and then you see a yellow line starting at this MCI point, going down into dementia, and that line is a steeper slope. So in the first category, we have what we call preclinical disease. This is sometimes people know there's a problem and they're really concerned about their memory, so they go to the doctor, but there's nothing detected on testing. So Myra asked me earlier, before everyone was on this call, like, what is the recommendation about baseline testing? And I would say it's really hard to pick up any kind of problem in baseline testing until there are symptoms. So this can be a frustrating time for a person. Sometimes we get these people in clinically, and the diagnosis that we give is subjective cognitive impairment. So either the person themselves or someone who knows them well are endorsing significant problems, but it's not being picked up on tests of memory and thinking. Now, there are other tests like biomarker tests, like a PET scan, that can be done to detect elevated levels of amyloid in a brain. And this is an area of research that's pretty cutting edge right now, looking at brain scans without any kind of objective testing indicators that there's a problem. So that's an emerging field of study right now. So preclinical. Over time, people who are experiencing this kind of subjective cognitive impairment, there is enough research to show that oftentimes it does develop into mild cognitive impairment or dementia. So it's not like your fears or your concerns are unfounded. It is likely that it could develop, but it's just not sensitive enough to be picked up on a test. So say you come in 3 years later, we gave you a diagnosis of subjective cognitive impairment. Things seem to be getting worse. Folks come in 3 years later, and lo and behold, these cognitive changes are more noticeable. One or more cognitive domains are impaired significantly, but it's not enough to interfere with activities of daily living. So this is an area that we call mild cognitive impairment, or MCI. Many people are living well with MCI, still working, still involved in their communities, but there is some impairment in either memory or language, or process executive function, the ability to plan and execute a plan. One of those areas is generally impaired, but it's not a dementia level of impairment. Now, the question often becomes, what causes mild cognitive impairment? Sometimes it is dementia. Sometimes it is caused by other things that can be modified, like it could be a vitamin B12 deficiency, or it could be a problem with thyroid. Sometimes people who consume a lot of alcohol can have can present like MCI. Sometimes people with significant depression or anxiety can present with MCI. All of those things can be treated, and a person could theoretically improve their function or stay the same. if it is Alzheimer's disease or another form of dementia that's causing the MCI, eventually the person will go on to develop dementia. In the next slide, I will address, more in detail what MCI is and how likely it is to progress. Once somebody progresses into the dementia stage of impairment, that yellow slope shows us it's a steeper slope than the green and the blue lines. It's a steeper slope down. That is not normal aging. And that line, we're looking at it, breaking it up into mild, moderate, severe, and severe stage over time. So a little bit more about mild cognitive impairment. Mild cognitive impairment is more understood now than it was when I started the Memory Center in 2006. We were just kind of on the cusp of understanding what MCI is. So currently it's thought to be an intermediate state between normal aging and dementia. It can progress to dementia, most often in the form of Alzheimer's disease. But again, not if it's not Alzheimer's pathology causing it, right? So that's a distinction that needs to be teased out. The prevalence of MCI in people 60 and older is about 6.7 to 25.2%. So a big, significant number of people experience mild cognitive impairment when they're 60 or over. And it increases with age, and it increases for people who have lower levels of education. Education is thought to be protective against cognitive decline. So oftentimes you see these very highly educated people who suddenly decompensate. And that's because they were able to maintain their cognitive function for a longer period of time and kind of work around any memory changes until they can't. So it presents, if Alzheimer's disease is the driver of the MCI, it presents first as short-term memory loss. It could also present as language or executive function, depending on what's causing it, what type of dementia is causing it. The annual rate of progression from MCI to dementia is about 5 to about 17% a year. So if this year I was diagnosed with mild cognitive impairment, the doctor will say, this is what it is. Come back in a year for an evaluation. When I come back next year, I have a 5 to 17% chance of progressing to a dementia level of impairment. If next year I go in and I'm still MCI, then the following year I'll go in and be worked up, and I'll have those same chances to see if I progress to dementia. If the doctor says, let's run this panel of tests, and finds that things are out of whack with my B12, my thyroid, I might be drinking, I might stop drinking, get those other things fixed, and the MCI could go back to normal, okay? Clinically speaking, MCI is a drop on test scores and causes mild functional impairment, but it doesn't meet the criteria for a dementia level of impairment. Okay, so that's MCI. Dementia, we still get asked the question on a regular basis, what's the difference between dementia and Alzheimer's disease? So dementia is not it is a diagnosis, but it's not a specific disease. It's a general term that describes a set of symptoms, and that set of symptoms is an impaired ability to, in memory, thinking, or decision making that interferes with everyday activities. So if somebody does test, so demonstrates, performs in this dementia level of impairment, the next question the doctors want to ask, or the next question they ask themselves, is what's causing the dementia? What type of disease is causing this dementia? Alzheimer's disease is the most common type of dementia in the United States. I'll show on the next slide some other forms of dementia. So dementia generally affects people in age 65 or older, although there is such a thing as early onset dementia that can start as early as, late 30s, early 40s. But even in older adults who don't experience it until later in life, it's not a part of normal aging. It is considered a brain disease. And so one easy-ish, way to think about dementia is an umbrella. So dementia is an umbrella term for loss of memory and other thinking abilities that interfere with daily life. I mentioned in the United States, Alzheimer's is the most common form of dementia. And that usually presents as short-term memory loss. Forgetting, what was just learned, but long-term memory loss is preserved, as well as other things that might happen later, like executive function or language. The hallmark of Alzheimer's is early presentation of short-term memory loss. Vascular dementia is what used to be called like hardening of the arteries. And people with vascular dementia tend to present not necessarily with memory, but more of like with apathy, or changes in personality, things like that, sleepiness. Lewy body dementia is a form of dementia that presents first with hallucination. So gait disturbances. So people might have a shuffled gait, and might be experiencing hallucinations that don't bother them much, but they might see, people outside that aren't there, or animals running through the house that aren't there as reported. The other people in the house can't see these things. Frontal temporal dementia is often presents either as language problems, aphasia. It can present as disinhibition, or personality changes, significant personality changes, and also executive function. So somebody who was high functioning in their job can no longer perform their job. That is an indicator of, and their memory is preserved. And in vascular Lewy body frontal temporal dementia, memory is preserved, but they present as having other kind of presenting issues. And there are about 60 more forms of dementia that are not as commonly known. More often than not, when people donate their brain to research and we do autopsy, post-mortem, dementia has more than one cause. It's very rare these days where we see pure Alzheimer's or pure frontal temporal dementia or pure Lewy body dementia. Often it's a mix of dementias. And that's what's made kind of, frankly, finding a cure difficult, because there's different processes going on in the brain. So just Alzheimer's is the most common form of dementia in the United States. It affects our memory, our cognition, and our behavior. It also affects judgment, reason, insight, speed, visual spatial abilities. And what's important to note here is that many people with Alzheimer's disease don't have insight into their disease. So, the majority of people calling the memory center for an appointment is not necessarily the person with the memory problem, but rather with their family members, people who know them well, spend a lot of time with them, and are concerned about the changes they see. More often than not, when the family comes in, usually more than the patient comes in, there's usually at least two people at the visit, the patient and somebody who knows them well, who gives kind of collateral information. Oftentimes the patient denies what they're hearing and they don't believe that they're actually having the problem. So that's one of the problems with Alzheimer's disease, is this lack of insight. It's a disease that goes in stages: mild, moderate, late. People can expect to be in mild stages for a couple of years. Moderate stages is the longest stage of illness, but also probably the most complicated to manage from a caregiver standpoint. That's where we see a lot of behavioral disturbances in the moderate stages. And then later, as the disease progresses, some of those difficult behaviors that might have been seen in the moderate stages, they tend to correct themselves, but the person has more problems with independent activities of daily living, such as grooming, toileting, walking, and this kind of thing. Um, and so, right now we don't have a cure, although we do expect to have a cure within, or not, I shouldn't say a cure. We should expect to have disease modifying treatments, FDA approved disease modifying treatments within the year. There are some promising medications coming down the pike. But even so, we think that it's important to have your memory examined, looked at, assessed, evaluated, because of a variety of reasons. There can be safety concerns. If a person lacks insight, they might be mismanaging their medications, and their medications might not just be for memory. They could be for other life kind of sustaining illnesses like insulin, management, or things like that, where it needs some attention if the person has a memory problem. Money can be grossly mismanaged. There are home safety issues, such as leaving on a burner on the cooktop, or falls. And then a big one is driving. You really don't want people out there driving if there are, significant memory problems that are causing slowness and inability to drive. Seeing a doctor also allows you to plan for your future and appoint a power of attorney to somebody that you trust and know who can help you make decisions. Once somebody is too impaired, they're unable to appoint a power of attorney, and then sometimes it has to go into guardianship, which is no one really wants. And you're also able at that point to make advanced directives or decisions about what you want in terms of life-sustaining measures. You're also able to get involved in research if that's something that you're interested in, and getting your condition treated with Aricept or something that can delay the progression of disease. And there might be other reasons to see a physician, but in the interest of time, I want to switch gears and kind of talk about what to do if you notice problems in memory or thinking with a neighbor or a friend, or even yourself. So if you're concerned about your memory, ask, I would encourage you to ask somebody who knows you well, someone you trust, somebody you can be vulnerable with, like a child that you trust, a doctor that you trust, a spiritual advisor that you trust, a best friend. Ask them to be honest if they're noticing any changes in your memory or thinking that are beyond the scope of normal cognitive aging. If they agree that there's reason to be concerned, maybe you can ask them to accompany you to an appointment. Like I said, not everyone with memory problems is aware of their problems. And more often than not, friends or family members notice it first. These are the people who call us to schedule appointments for evaluations, but it's not necessary to immediately go to a memory center like the Penn Memory Center if there's a problem. Most people have a primary care physician. Ideally, if folks are 65 or older, they're with a geriatrician who does have training in memory changes, more so than a regular primary care physician. When people are on Medicare or Medicaid, and they should be offered a memory test starting at age 65 from their geriatrician's office. We know that this isn't always happening, so you should ask your geriatrician to give you a test of memory and thinking when you're at that visit. If you score below the normal range for your age and educational attainment, then you might want to have a conversation about what to do. Should you go and have an evaluation at a memory center? Oftentimes, a geriatrician is able to diagnose and manage care, and the memory center is a great referral for people who are interested in participating in research and learning about cutting edge treatments. So that is the information that I prepared for you. I thought what I would do is see if there are any questions. And if there are no questions, or I can answer a couple questions, but I kind of want to get into what do you do if you notice somebody who's having these, who's experiencing changes in memory. So I'll stop screen share for just a minute to see if anyone has any wants to ask any questions about any of the material I just presented, and I'll maybe spend a minute or two on, or take one or two questions on any of that information. I see a hand raised. Ruth, I saw Ruth's hand go up.
Hi, how are you? Thank you for your excellent talk. It's been very full of information. I was particularly interested, was there some family history of vascular dementias? And you said sleepiness. That is one of the characteristics. Did you say sleepiness? Could you tell me a little bit more about the symptomatology of vascular dementias that you've seen?
Yeah. So vascular dementia can present as, like I said, apathy, or sleepiness or isolation, just kind of wanting to socially isolate, not being involved, wanting to nap more. It can also present as kind of irritability, maybe a little bit angry presentation, less so the memory. Memory tends to be preserved. It's more of these kind of changes in personality a little bit, and also instead of a steep decline like Alzheimer's, it's more of what we call stepwise. So someone will be kind of the same, and then they'll like take a dip. There will be like a drop in function, and then they'll plateau again, and then there will be another drop and then a plateau. So that's just some symptomatology of that presentation. Ruth, I think you're muted.
You could also conceptually have a comorbidity of vascular with depression. I mean, if you have a loss of the same one.
Yes.
Okay.
And depression can be a comorbidity with all of these as well.
Yeah. So you have to sort of sort it out like a puzzle, what is really the primary driver. And vascular is like making clots. I won't ask anymore. I'll let other people ask questions, but it's vascular, meaning that the blood clots get in your brain. Is that how?
That's right. Yeah. The blood flow. The blood is not flowing to the brain.
Okay. All right. Thank you again. I'm going to let other people.
Myra.
I wanted to ask, what is in the fluid intelligence, you said psychomotor, which sounds like dangerous driving to me. I don't know what that is.
Motor abilities, yeah, like your brain is not telling your body to move quickly enough, right? So slower processing speed, and yes, so
it could affect driving.
It absolutely could affect driving, yes, and walking, but yeah. All right. What I want to do is quickly go back here and share, and just pull up my first question. What should you do if you notice a friend or a neighbor is having problems with memory, cognition, or is behaving differently? So what if you notice these 10 warning signs? I gave you information about what's normal, and then I gave you information about what is not normal. What is a reason to be concerned? So you notice somebody. Myra wanted me to give the presentation on what to do, but I want to hear from you. What do you think you should do? Does anyone have any thoughts about how to handle that? If you can just unmute and speak up because I can't see everyone here. Ruth, is that you? Did you read?
I don't want to hog up the time though. If anyone else wants to ask, I'll start the brainstorming. Is that it really depends on the relationship. If you have a close relationship, I would think you could bring it up with the person. Have you noticed are you distressed? Are you anything you can do? I mean, I would even I would even help them if there's some ways they can have some cognitive tips to help their memory at first. But it's a delicate kind of problem of how do you bring it up without accusing someone of dementia. Or I get this a lot, but my son will say, you told me that story. And I remember telling my father, you've told me that story. My father repeated it. I haven't used it, but was saying, someday you'll wish I could tell you the story in person again. He would turn it around a little bit, but it was something that was just a dear story to him. So some of this is just sentimental, repeating yourself, but some of it may be that you're not aware that you're doing it. And that's, how you want to be delicate about it because it is your brain and your heart and your soul a little bit, sometimes. And
yeah, thank you. It is delicate. It is your brain, your heart, and your soul, and it's also your independence, right? I think people will get really afraid of if, they're afraid of what might happen to their independence. It becomes threatened if there is a problem, right? Anyone here, what if somebody noticed some concerns about you? What if somebody had concerns about you? How would you prefer they handle it?
So this is Barbara. I think one of the things we can do almost from a prevention standpoint, hopefully for all of us, it's still prevention, is many of us have within this network or outside of the network, a close circle of friends that we trust, and to kind of make a deal, that I would like it if somebody tells me, I would like to hear it from my peers and my good friends before I hear it from my kids. So for me, I would like it if I had a few buddies, like memory buddies, and we could let each other know, am I repeating the story more than usual? Have you noticed that I've missed, just all the warning signs that you said. So for me, I think of it more, establish those relationships before it happens so that we have this comfortable network of people that we trust to talk to us about our memory. I think how to do it is hard because it really varies from person to person. And I agree with Ruth, it depends on your relationship with that person. So some people might react better with saying it kind of with a sense of humor. Some people might want you to get like kind of up close and personal and be really kind and gentle. Some people might have kids that and you might involve them in not behind the back, but can we go talk to you, with your daughter because I've been noticing some things. And so I think it really depends. But I love the idea of let's get some memory buddies and help each other to know when it might be time to go for a test.
I love that idea. Ali?
This is sort of redundant. I was going to say something right before Barbara did, but I actually have a pact with two friends, and we have sort of promised each other that we would say something if we saw it happening. So it's sort of saying to somebody, to a friend, I trust you. I want you to know because I want you to help me if you see something happening. And so there's a little bit of a trust thing there and a little bit of relief knowing that somebody hopefully will be able to tell you that they're seeing that in you.
Wonderful.
So I think that's been a sort of a good feeling for me to have that.
Pact. Love that. Mio? Did I pronounce it right?
Yes. I admired my brother-in-law's mother, who's passed away at this point, but she had told her kids that whenever she'd have a younger visitor come, she'd have them go out and drive and be with her in the car as she drove. And if they noticed that she wasn't keeping to speed, wasn't, signaling when she should, etc., that, they needed to tell her that. So she was being proactive in terms of accepting the fact that this is going to happen and that she did not want to put herself or other people in danger. So I've just sort of tucked that away of, okay, remember that one. and I think that's true of any of the decisions that we make, that if as much as we can make the decisions, then you're not going to have this. And so many of us, I'm sure, have seen situations where parents and children have just had real deep difficulties because of having to be honest. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, I told Myra when she asked me to do this talk, I said it might be frustrating because my answer is going to be, it depends. There are so many variables that go into this. And so I think that having talks like this is wonderful because it gets people kind of thinking about it, thinking about how they want to handle it. And so maybe what you all can do is find someone in your network to talk about this and what you would want for yourself, and even ask people what they would want if you noticed some things to be concerned about. Another thing that folks do is they get involved in research, and as you know, as a normal control, like, let's get involved in research, we'll get worked up, and we go in under the idea that we're going to be normal controls in this research. And people do that a lot of times, by the way. They go, I'm going to get involved in research, and then if they don't test in the normal range, then we have that conversation with them. But oftentimes there's research buddies, so two folks can go in and say, let's do this, we're going to help a cause, we'll get an evaluation, and you know, hopefully there's no problem, but you know, if there is, there will be a safety net and people at the center to kind of help navigate what's ahead. I want to show you, I'm just going to pull this up on my screen. So I had a couple questions here, but we're running out of time. The other question was like, if you received a diagnosis, who would you disclose it to and why? These are things for you to think about. But I'm going to share my slides. I'm going to send my slides to Myra, and she can share them with all of you. But I have a list of resources here. There's our website to the Memory Center, a geriatrician. You can call if you don't have a geriatrician, I recommend calling your insurance plan to ask who's in network and get hooked up with a geriatrician. The Alzheimer's Association has a wealth of information on their website, as does the Area Agency on Aging. I gave you the Philadelphia Area Agency on Aging website here. If you're feeling like you're having some cognitive changes that have you feeling blue or down, I would suggest reaching out to a therapist or a psychiatrist for an evaluation. You could call there's a number on the back of your insurance card for mental health, and they'll tell you who are some therapists in network. If you're interested in connecting with a therapist who specializes in memory or caregiving, I have a list of therapists, so you can always reach out to me. My email address is at the very bottom of this page. I'm happy to extend myself beyond this call with any questions if you want to reach out to me. There is this YouTube link. It says PMC's neuropsychologist Dawn Mechanic-Hamilton gave a talk on interventions for healthy brain aging. That is a YouTube link that you'll be able to access from these slides. And she shares some really great tips for compensatory strategies for people who are experiencing memory changes. There's also a link to our research registry. If anyone is interested in research, this link will be in the slides that I share, as well as Morgan Adams's email address, and she is kind of in charge of our research outreach. And my S dropped here for references, but these are the references that I use to support my talk. So I'll stop there. Send my slides to Myra. She can distribute them to you. People can feel free to reach out to me with any questions, or if you have concerns that you want to talk about, we can have an offline conversation. And I'm happy to come back if you all want me to. So Myra, just let me know.
Okay, thank you very much. This was very informative and great.
Thank you.
And also thank you to the people who talked about their strategies, because I thought that was very helpful.
Yeah, for sure. And I can always do a part 2 without the preamble, and we can just we can even do something like that. So think about it and be in touch, okay?
Thank you. Thanks a
I
lot.
hope everybody has a great night.